Speaker is Norman Otis Richmond, and he's a long-time radio producer. He was host at Saturday Morning Live and Diasporic Music at 88.1 FM CKLN. He's also the co-founder of the Black Music Association Toronto chapter, and he's going to speak about his work as one of the co-founders of the Biko-Malcolm-Rodney Coalition in Toronto in the 1980s and 1990s to make a connection to organizing here in Toronto and in the area against South African apartheid at that time. And this coalition worked on the cultural boycott of South African apartheid, and they demonstrated against artists who visited and performed in South Africa and gave awards to those artists who turned down lucrative offers to perform in South Africa. Artists such as Roberta Flack, Third World, Mighty Sparrow, Sweet Honey in the Rock, and also Dan Hill, who's also a renowned singer-songwriter here in Canada. And For the Moment, a female vocal group from Nova Scotia. Thanks to Norman for joining us as well, please.
I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I would like to say that the Biko-Rodney Malcolm Coalition took its name from Stephen Biko, Walter Rodney, and El Hajj Malik El Shabazz Malcolm X. And we took the name because Biko was from the African continent, Walter Rodney was from the Caribbean, and Malcolm was from North America. I was also part of the Black Music Association, the Toronto chapter, and the Black Music Association, the Toronto chapter. The Toronto chapter was known as the most outspoken chapter when it came to the question of South African apartheid. We were instrumental in getting the organization to take an anti-apartheid position, which I'll go into a little bit later. And I was also part of a newspaper called Contrast, which was right there on Lenox Street. I was a black weekly newspaper, and people like Norris Bishop used to come in there, Walter Rodney, and Bishop used to come and help lay out the paper sometimes. But the cultural boycott basically started in the 60s. I think it was Trevor Huddleston. He was a priest. He had something to do with Hugh Masekela and people like that. But the Beatles were some of the first people to come out against the whole the cultural boycott. And the United Nations sanctioned this boycott beginning in 1968. Now what happened was that, artists started to go into South Africa. They started giving these lucrative contracts, and they would make you an honorary white. Now, that was a term that they made you honorary white. Now, the movement made a decision that people that went to South Africa before 1976, we would not target them. Now, the reason, that was a whole debate we had within the movement. For example, Reuben Hurricane Carter fought in South Africa before 1976. And when Reuben Carter fought in South Africa, he worked with Stephen Biko, who worked with him at that particular time when he went to South Africa. And after 1976, the reason 76 was picked because people could make an argument that people really didn't know that much about South Africa because they really didn't. But after 1976, after June of 1976, June 12th or 13th, Soweto Rebellion took place, and people said, okay, that's the cutoff point when people had been killed. But we could argue that Sharpeville took place in 1960, I believe, But some people were slower than the others, and some people were less militant than the others. So there was basically a compromise. Now, the United Nations began to organize conferences in New York City, and I went to 2 of those conferences in 1983, 84, I believe. And I was elected as a vice president, and that was 6 or 7 vice presidents. And we began to do a lot of work around the cultural boycott. And I had lived in Detroit, Michigan before. I came from Los Angeles originally, and we were influenced heavily by Malcolm X and the Nation of Islam. Although I had never joined the Nation of Islam, we were really influenced by the Nation of Islam. So we knew about people like Gamal Abdel Nasser, Ahmed bin Bella, and we we loved bin Bella because bin Bella really showed that the Algerians showed a lot of support for the African American struggle. For example, bin Bella always, when he came to Harlem and he met with Malcolm X, he also met with Martin Luther King. A lot of people don't know that. And when he met with Martin Luther King, there was a statement where they said Martin Luther King came out of the meeting, after meeting with Ahmed bin Bella, sounding like Ernesto Che Guevara. And, you know, bin Bella was overthrown, and then you had a guy by the name of Boumediene. And Boumediene was allowed the Black Panther parties to have a base in Algeria. And Boumediene, they had a cultural conference in Algeria, and a lot of people went to that conference in Algiers. So we had a lot of respect for some of the people in the Arab world. And of course, Malcolm X was really responsible for a lot of that. And then we had a situation where I went to Detroit, Michigan, and I joined a group called the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, but I should really tell you the real story. But I came to Canada when I was deported from Canada. I refused to go to Vietnam. They deported me because I couldn't pass the test. I was supposed to be an idiot, so they basically kicked me out of the country, and I was supposed to basically turn myself in, and they would arrest me, but of course I sort of disappeared. So I go to Detroit, and I meet people like General Gordon Baker, who had been to Cuba and met Che Guevara, and he's also, when Malcolm X spoke in Detroit, the message to the grassroots speech, Malcolm X is saying, "You're afraid to bleed." That's General Baker hollering, "We'll bleed, we'll bleed." So once again, I was enforced, my whole anti-imperialist situation was enforced by, meeting people like that. But when I came to Detroit, I found out that the Palestinians supported the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, as well as people from Yemen. What do you call people from Yemen? Yemenis? Yemenis. The Yemenis and the Palestinians supported black workers. Now, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers was when it started out as a Dodge Revolutionary Union movement, started in a plant. And they were an all-black organization, and there was a whole question about, there was a problem with the UAW. We used to say the UAW means you ain't white. And we started, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and we received support from the Palestinians and the brothers and sisters from Yemen. And the brothers and sisters from Yemen, all of a sudden they disappeared. And we found out they disappeared because they went back to fight, and they had for a moment, they had a socialist government. So the cultural boycott for me was, I was ready for the cultural boycott when we started the Biko-Malcolm-Rodney Coalition. And we started out by targeting people who had gone to South Africa. The first thing we did was we identified all those who had gone to South Africa, and we wanted to make an example of them. I was actually hired by the United Nations to sit in the library and to read the South African newspapers to monitor who had gone to South Africa to prove it. And then we would send the names in, and they would put them on the list. Now, the United Nations sanctioned the cultural boycott of South Africa. I don't know if the United Nations has or will sanction a boycott against Israel. I think that's a big difference between the two situations. Now, I know in 1955 they had the Bandung Conference, and Palestine was under the gun then. And I know 50 years later in 2005, Thabo Mbeki went to Indonesia. They had a second Bandung Conference, and Palestine was still under occupation. And we're in 2011, halfway through 2011, and Palestine is still in the same situation. So I was one of the people from Canada that found out who had gone to South Africa, and then we began to, people who went to South Africa, when they came to Toronto, we would demonstrate against them. Also, we had a coalition of people from, there was a group called the Unity and Action Network. They had a chapter in New York City, led by a man by the name of Ilombe Brath, who is still in the land of the living. He's very sick now. And he had a chapter in Los Angeles, which was led by Ron Wilkins, who grew up in the same neighborhood as I grew up. And he was also a big man in SNCC, and a brother by the name of Kumasi, who was in prison with George Jackson. Then we had a relationship with some people in Albany, New York, Vera Michelson. Vera Michelson, I don't even know if Vera is still in the land of the living. So we would coordinate a lot of activities. Okay, Ray Charles is coming. And we would hit Ray Charles if he came to Toronto, if he came to Albany, New York, came to New York, if he came to Los Angeles, he went to St. Louis. I think we went against Ray Charles about 12 times all across North America. And then Ray Charles, this is another thing about Ray Charles. Ray Charles is a man that I personally loved as an artist. I can remember sitting, growing up, listening, I could sing all of Ray Charles' songs backwards.
Sing one now.
Later. We have to negotiate a fee first. So Ray Charles was a man who we loved. I mean, we loved Ray. He was a man who could not, he was, whatever the politically correct word is, he couldn't see. A man who could play, he could read, write music, he could arrange music, he could play saxophone, and he could sing his butt off. He's influenced Ray Charles, Sly Stone, that's Ray Charles in a modern sense. Now here's a man who went to Paris, and when he goes to Paris, once again I'm going back to the Algerian says that as long as Ray Charles is in Paris, we're going to stop the war. They're fighting that France and Algeria at war. They say as long as Brother Ray is in Algeria, don't worry, nobody will do anything. As long as Ray Charles leaves, we'll start again. But as long as Ray is there, Ray Charles is a man who goes to Jamaica, and people watch him in the rain, and someone actually gets killed. Some whatever you call them, girders fall on some people, and someone actually got killed. And then when Ray Charles decided to go to South Africa, people begged him, Ray Charles, they love you in South Africa. Please do not come. And I think he went on the Black Consciousness Day. That's the day that it has something to do with either Stephen Biko was killed on that day, not the same day, but it was an anniversary. So people basically flipped out over that. And so we went after Ray Charles everywhere he went. And Ray Charles never, ever, 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 ever apologized. And this is the last Ray Charles story, is that Ron Wilkins met with Ray Charles' manager, who was a black guy, still in the land of the living, by the name of Joe Adams. He's He's a black guy. He played in the Manchurian Candidate. He had a speaking part. He played Frank Sinatra's psychiatrist in the Manchurian Candidate. He was in Carmen Jones. The man is brilliant, but he's a crook. He and Ray Charles sang the national anthem at the Republican convention. And Ron Wilkins met with Mr. Joe Adams, and Mr. Joe Adams had his pistol on his side, and he told Ron Wilkins, he says, those white folks paid us $50,000 for one, I think they might have sang 2 songs. He said, for that kind of money, we would have sang God Bless America or the Ku Klux Klan. And so we went after Ray Charles, and I don't think Ray Charles ever apologized. We also went after Johnny Mathis. There was a group from Toronto whose name I wanted to mention, Goldie Hawn, and these people were, I don't know, I think Goldie Hawn eventually apologized, but Ray Charles never apologized. Johnny Mathis did apologize. And we had an honor roll of people that refused to go. Gil Scott-Heron, Roberta Flack, Dan Hill, Phyllis Hyman, Third World, The Mighty Sparrow, Randy Weston, who was coming to the Toronto Jazz Festival, who is, his records were banned in South Africa. He did a song called Uhuru Africa in 1960, and the South African government banned all of the music that had now in it. Lena Horne, Randy Weston, Max Roach, Abby Lincoln, all of that stuff was banned. Linton Kwesi Johnson was on the honor roll. Michelle Schacht, Billy Bragg. And the people that we got apologies from were Frank Sinatra, Tina Turner, Eartha Kitt, Rita Coolidge, Millie Jackson, that was a hard one. Chick Corea, Air Supply, Neil Sedaka, Ann Margaret, and Pia Sedora. Now, I thought when what's-her-name came to Toronto, I thought I was really going to jail that day, because when Tina Turner came to Toronto, she came to a place called the Copa, and I don't know who did it, but somebody fired up the crowd so much. Tina's limousine came, and I don't know who did it, but someone almost turned the limousine over. So I just thought that we'd have to do a little time in jail. It got rather heated. And the South African, like the whole South African thing in Palestine, I think the United Nations seems like the United Nations is a big problem, because if the United Nations has not sanctioned it, they can always go after you by saying this is like an illegal act. What are you boycotting? I know a lot of artists that have gone to Israel. They have a basketball team that comes from Israel that plays the Raptors every single year, and they get away with murder. So basically, I'm saying that the lessons that can be learned. First of all, the BDS campaign is something that the majority of the people on the left in the world support. And I think BDS started in Toronto, started in Palestine, but people in Toronto were among the first to pick it up. And I think that I'm going to close by saying that Paul Robeson, Harry Belafonte, and people like that have always said that the artists must take a stand, and we have to take a stand on the side of the oppressed, and that's where we should make our stand, and not on the side of those who oppress us. And we know that the Israel, the state of Israel, Barack Hussein Obama, Stephen Harper, Angela Merkel, Mr. Sarkozy. These are people that are on the wrong side of history, and we must stand with the people of Palestine and the progressive forces in the world. Like Maurice Bishop always said, he supported the Palestinian people. I remember him linking Palestine with South Africa. I remember Thomas Sankara from Burkina Faso supporting, always talking about Palestine. I remember Angela Davis always talking about Palestine. I remember Assata Shakur always talking about Palestine. And it's kind of hard sometimes supporting Palestinians because, you know, it's like I say, it's a hot button issue. But I think people, oppressed people, progressive people, no matter what nationality, should support the struggle for the return of Palestinians and for whatever arrangement that the Palestinians want. The two-state solution, I know I'll get in trouble for saying this, but that's no solution. I can't say, I can't say, I think I'm for I'm not a Palestinian, but you know, I support a secular, one secular state. Thank you very much.